As of this recording, the COVID-19 outbreak happened 5 years ago. 5 years! It doesn't feel too long ago that I was chilling in class as a sophomore in high school, hearing rumblings about a coronavirus. No one at my school thought it was going to be a big deal. It couldn't be that bad, right? Then, in early March, rumors started bubbling that this coronavirus thing may be a bit more serious than we thought, and a few of my teachers were even saying that the school may close for a short while until we get a handle on things. Thursday, March 12th, 2020. I'm sitting in biology class for the last period of the day. Me and all my classmates were anxiously awaiting for that announcement that school would be closed for several weeks, because at this point, the rumors were so strong that we were just expecting it. Sure enough, the governor of Ohio announced that for 3 weeks, we would not be at school and would instead switch to remote learning. The plan was to start regular school back up again in early April, and then it moved to early May, and eventually they announced that there would be no in-person classes for the rest of the school year. It wasn't just schools. Any businesses that weren't considered essential were closed indefinitely, leaving us stuck at home. That meant no more going out, no more gambling, no more Friday night trips to the nursing home. It was a depressing and confusing time, but we did have one thing to keep our minds busy while the world was burning to the ground, and you already know what it is. Gaming during quarantine was a very surreal time. Before I go on with this, I need to emphasize that this is not meant to romanticize the COVID-19 outbreak. It was obviously a really dark time where a lot of people lost their jobs and a lot of people even lost their lives. This video is not me looking back on this general time period with warm, fuzzy feelings of nostalgia. It was a really low point in my life and for many others. Take this as me looking back on one tiny good thing that came out of a really bad situation, as well as just appreciating the art of video games for distracting us while the world was in flames. So let's talk about it. To start things off, I wanted to specify what time period I'm considering part of quarantine, since it was different for a lot of people depending on things like where you lived. I'm from the magical land of Ohio, and for us, things slowly started opening back up in the summer. By the time August rolled around, we were able to attend school in person again, though obviously things were quite different and we would occasionally switch to remote classes when too many people were getting sick. I think some people were still doing remote classes during the fall. I'm not sure how common it was, but March 2020 to summer 2020 is the time that I consider quarantine. That was the period I was stuck at home the most with nothing better to do but play video games. Even though I still had to do schoolwork from March to May, the switch to remote work meant that I had a lot more time than normal to play games. Here's the thing with remote learning at the time. We did not have the infrastructure to do this effectively yet, at least at my school. Teachers didn't really know how to go about doing it yet, so assignments were basically super condensed versions of the stuff we'd normally be doing. There were almost no Zoom meetings at this time because no one knew how to do it properly, and we were a small school in a rural area, so not everyone had an internet connection stable enough to do video chat. Lastly, most people would just use the internet to cheat through homework and tests without ever getting caught. All of that added up to us getting our assignments dumped on us on Monday, and basically knocking them all out by the end of Tuesday. We had so much extra time to kill, and gaming was the primary way to do this. When the school year started later in fall 2020 and we were back to in-person classes, there were some micro-quarantines that happened when things got out of hand, like I mentioned, but at that point, my teachers had figured out how to do online teaching effectively. That's when stuff like regular Zoom calls and daily assignments started, so it took up almost as much time as in-person classes. Therefore, I don't consider it the glory days of gaming during COVID. The real glory days for me were March 2020 to summer 2020. It was a shitty time to be alive, but at least we had video games to keep us entertained. That brings us to the games I was playing, the games that got me through the pandemic. I played a mix of games that released during the pandemic that everyone was playing, as well as ones that were released before everything went to hell, so overall, this list is pretty personal to me. There's no better game to start with than Animal Crossing New Horizons. It's been said a million times before, this game came out at the perfect time. With all the chaos going on in the world and how bleak everything felt, a wholesome little game with zero stressors, a cozy atmosphere, and social features was exactly what the world needed. The thing that was cool about the release of this game for me was the fact that, for the first time, I didn't have to deal with the agonizing weight that comes with sitting in school on a Friday knowing that a game in one of my favorite series released that day, but I have to wait until the clock strikes 3 before I can pick it up. I obviously didn't have to go to school that day, so I was able to arrive at GameStop right as they opened at 10 o'clock to get it. I feel like with how much I've criticized this game in other videos, people may have gotten the wrong idea and think that I hate this game, but that couldn't be further from the truth. This is one of my favorite games of all time, and I consider it my second favorite Animal Crossing game behind New Leaf. I tend to be extra critical with game series that I love simply because I want them to be the best they can possibly be. Those early days of New Horizons were something special. That feeling of developing your island completely from scratch is so cool, and it's an aspect of the game I feel like a lot of people forget about, myself included. Once your island is pretty developed, you kinda just forget about that part. With how little time I needed to dedicate to schoolwork during remote learning, I sunk so much time into this game. It's really interesting how this game cemented itself in video game history due to the coincidence of its release date. It was originally supposed to come out in 2019, but then got delayed, and it was unintentionally the greatest thing that could have possibly happened to this game. Because of that, this is a game we'll be mentioning to our children when talking about the pandemic. A game that was released alongside New Horizons on March 20th was Doom Eternal. I didn't get around to playing this one until about a year later, but I did enjoy all the memes that came out of this dual release. This was the Barbenheimer for gamers. If you weren't playing Animal Crossing, you were probably playing this, so I thought I should mention it. I'm not sure how many other people were playing this next game during the pandemic since it was released before quarantine on February 14th, but another game I was playing a lot during quarantine was Dreams for the PS4. For those that don't know, Dreams was a game where you could create your own games and share them with the world. I'm not good at the whole creating thing, so I just used it to play other people's games. I remember me and my sisters were watching Mr. Video Game Donkey play Witchy Woods, and that alone was enough to get the three of us to put our money together and buy the game. I don't know if it's just me, but this game is trippy. Something about playing Mrs. Bangles Loves Bread during a global pandemic invoked a totally new feeling in me that I've never been able to capture since.
Oh, bread! Bread! Oh, yay, bread! Bread! Oh, bread! Oh.
Witchy Woods lived up to the hype, in case you were wondering. We found out that you can actually kill the witch by running her over with the truck, which was a revelation greater than realizing you can actually dry your silverware faster by putting it in the microwave. Try it actually works! Overall, the game just has this really weird vibe and atmosphere to it that I have a hard time explaining. One might even call it dreamlike. I think part of it is just the art style with the haziness and the sometimes darkened colors. It makes some games feel straight up uncanny. Some of these creations are really bizarre and surreal, and playing them during the pandemic when every day felt surreal, it was a weird time, man. I don't know how else to describe it. It was just really weird. Not too long after picking up Dreams, I got laid off from my first job at a local pizza joint due to restrictions caused by COVID that limited how many people could be employed. I'd only been working there for 2 months, so I was a part of the initial wave of layoffs since I was one of the most inexperienced. That was a real kick in the balls because the main reason I got that job was so I could simultaneously save up to build my first PC, the PS5 which was coming out later that year, and a new phone. You know, literally everything but saving for college. It was next to impossible to find a new job at this time, so I was unemployed there for a while. Anyway, the point of me mentioning this is that I then had even more free time on my hands. Thank God I had video games to get me through this time. Genuine question. What do people who don't play video games even do when they're at home and they're all done with their responsibilities for the day? Read a book? Doom scroll? Crank hog all day? I seriously don't know. One game I feel like I have to mention even though I never actually played it is Undertale. My little sister got really into this one, and I just watched her play it. And now whenever I hear the soundtrack, I get transported back to the day I was stuck at home 24/7. Another game I played during the pandemic was The Last of Us. I was quite late to the party with this one, but better late than never. It's pretty disappointing to see the perception of this series get soured in the public eye due to how much it was milked with all the remasters, the TV show, and the cancelled multiplayer game, but nothing anyone says affects how much I love these games. I actually started this game in January 2020, but I didn't finish it until March 2020 when we got quarantined and I finally had time to play it. It was one of those super rare games that I enjoyed so much that as soon as the credits stopped rolling, I immediately started over and beat the whole thing over again. Playing this game during an actual pandemic was, there's that word again, surreal. When I started on my second playthrough in early April, we were really in the thick of the pandemic. I so vividly remember watching the opening credits sequence and hearing them say, "The governor has called a state of emergency, World Health Organization, quarantine," and hearing those words made goosebumps erupt all over my body because I was hearing those same words and phrases all too frequently in the real world. This is one of my top 5 favorite games of all time, so obviously I was crazy excited for the sequel. That was the good thing about playing the game as late as I did. I only had to wait a little over 2 months after beating The Last of Us to play the sequel. That brings us to the delays that were caused by the pandemic. There were some notable, highly anticipated games getting their release dates pushed back. A lot of games may not have been publicly delayed, but we all knew COVID was causing internal delays for pretty much every game in development at that time. A big one that comes to mind for me is Tears of the Kingdom, or simply known as Breath of the Wild 2 at the time. It was announced to be in development during Nintendo's E3 2019 presentation, but it never got a release window. I remember that was a constant source of anxiety for me during the pandemic. Thinking the development for the sequel of my favorite game ever probably came to a screeching halt when COVID hit. God, I'm glad those days are over. The other big one delayed publicly was The Last of Us Part 2. The first release date this game got was on February 21st, 2020, but later got delayed before the pandemic started to May 29th. On April 2nd, it was announced that the game was almost complete, but was going to be delayed indefinitely due to logistical problems caused by the pandemic, and this absolutely crushed me. I still remember where I was when I received the news. I'm riding in the car with my little sister who's also a huge fan of the game. I see the news on Twitter, and then I turn to my little sister with all color drained from my face and say, "They just delayed The Last of Us Part 2 indefinitely." Gosh, so many options. How do you want to do it? Keep in mind, we were less than 2 months away from the release. The word indefinitely was really what got me, because I assumed that meant they were going to wait until the pandemic was over and life was back to normal. The problem was, back then, we had absolutely no idea how long this thing was going to last. It could have been later that year, or it could have been several years for all we knew. Beyond the logistical issues, did they even want to release a game about a global pandemic during an actual global pandemic? Did they think it would be too insensitive? They said themselves that this was an actual concern in their Grounded 2 documentary. It was a miserable time to be a Last of Us fan, and I imagine it was at least 10 times worse for the people who have been fans since 2013. The misery didn't last long, however, because it eventually got a release date of June 19th. In the end, it ended up getting delayed less than a month. The day it came out was the day I was returning home from a camping trip. I raced back to my hometown, picked up a Red Bull from Walmart, picked up my crisp copy of The Last of Us Part 2 from GameStop, zoomed home, and proceeded to play the game for 6 hours straight. Playing video games for hours on end is something I rarely do, but the intro of this game absolutely hooked me, and that hook was in deep. As you might know, feelings on this game are quite divided, but all that matters to me is how much I enjoy a game, and this is one of my favorite games of all time. If you want my reasoning why, that's a story for another day. At this point in the pandemic, things were opening back up again in Ohio, and things were returning to a state of somewhat normal. The stuff you could do was limited, but you could still go out and find something to do. Obviously I wasn't in school anymore because it was summer, but I had since got a new job at another local pizza joint in May, so I was no longer rotting at home for days on end. Things weren't totally back to normal, so I still needed gaming as a crutch to kill time when I couldn't do other things, but I wasn't as reliant on it as I was before. I could actually go out and do some stuff. Next, I wanted to talk about the overall feel of playing video games at this time. The feelings and vibes of playing video games during quarantine were something really unique, and it's something I will always cherish. I must reiterate that I am not longing to go back to those days, but that doesn't change the fact that the whole terrible situation gave me some good memories. One of the biggest reasons I cherished some of those times was because it was nice to be able to relax and play games without the nagging feeling that I was supposed to be doing something else. Like I said, schoolwork was kind of a joke during the early days of remote learning, so once I was done with all my assignments, what else was there for me to do? I was still in high school. School was like my only responsibility. And then there was the social aspect. Even as a hardcore introvert, the lack of social interaction was really taking its toll on me after a while. However, it was kinda nice being able to just play a game by myself on a Friday night, without that stupid voice in the back of my head telling me, "You're spending your weekends wrong, damn it! You're supposed to be going out, partying it up, meeting girls." Nah, fuck that. There was no going out at this time. It was just me, a can of Red Bull or Dr. Pepper, and Tom Nook. And I had the goddamn time of my life. I know I shouldn't have to rely on a deadly pandemic to enjoy my weekends how I want. It's still something I'm trying to get better at to this day. Like I said, I was really missing hanging out with my friends. Like a lot of other people, I need a healthy balance between socializing and staying in by myself. But it sure was nice getting to experience playing video games without feeling like I was missing out on something. Another interesting feeling that came from gaming during COVID was the feeling of escapism. I touched on this earlier, but that feeling that the world was falling apart around you and you're just chilling on your cozy little island with your villagers was a very warm feeling, and it's one you won't ever be able to replicate. At least you hopefully won't ever be able to replicate it. It was a totally unique feeling, one that I have never felt before and have not felt since. There have been times that loosely resemble it, such as going through periods of extreme stress in my personal life, so I use video games as a means of getting away from it. But using video games to temporarily escape something affecting the entire world? That was something completely different. It made my appreciation for video games even deeper. Words alone can't describe that state of being, so hopefully you can remember what I'm talking about. New Horizons definitely evoked that feeling the most. This makes sense considering it's a life simulation game. What better way to get away from the horrors that were happening in the real world than to indulge in an island paradise where you can experience only the best parts of life? Well, aside from the whole suffocating debt thing. I don't know what else to say other than it was a weird and special time. I can't say I'm glad it happened, but it did happen, and there's nothing we can do to change that. I might as well be grateful for how enjoyable playing video games was during that time, as well as appreciate what video games can do. They're such powerful pieces of art that can teleport you out of a literal global pandemic and into a world that puts you at ease. Or just into another pandemic. I played some really high quality games during this time, and the circumstances made me enjoy and appreciate them even more than I would have otherwise. And that's all I have to say, so farewell.